One thing that students struggle with is the difference between the philosophy journal and the philosophy statement. And again, it's sort of important to keep these in mind because they aren't the same thing. The philosophy journal is a signed journal that I've given you that's supposed to guide you through some of the basics of the philosophies that you'll be reading in the textbook. Constructivist approach, traditional approach, et cetera, okay? And which one that you land closest to, essentially, is the purpose of the philosophy journal. Now, the philosophy statement is sort of a builder off of that, and I suppose that's where some of the confusion stems from. But the philosophy statement is something that almost every potential employer will ask their teacher to submit to them when they apply for a position. And the philosophy statement is essentially what you will tell the future administrator that will be your boss or superintendent how you intend to run the classroom. And there's a variety of ways of thinking of the philosophy statement. But what you want to do is think there's a specific, somewhat specific, three-paragraph structure you want to follow. So, sorry, there was a skip there. I had to sneeze. So anyway, so what you want to do is loosely structure your philosophy statement into 3 paragraphs. Now, there's no one right way to put together a philosophy statement. So what I'm going to tell you now is a good way of getting started. And then as you develop your own writing voice or as you get more classroom experience, you may find yourself tinkering with what you're going to say. But the first paragraph should really deal with your conception of how to teach. In other words, what you think that the classroom, the philosophical basis for the classroom is. What are the goals that you're trying to put together as you work on teaching? So that also includes your conception of learning. So what are students getting out of what you're trying to do as well? So you may say something like, you don't need to name names for specific philosophies, but you can say, I take an approach in which in elementary school, all of the students are engaged in projects in which, for instance, we take a unit and we focus entirely on, and this is from my own experience, apples. Okay, so we're counting apples for mathematics, we're describing apples for language arts, we're talking about Johnny Appleseed for lit, we're talking about something for history and social studies, that may be Johnny Appleseed as well. So anyway, and then what you want to do in the next couple of sentences is talk about how that impacts student learning. So students are more engaged when they have a constant theme running throughout their entire curricula, and so on. Okay, so that's going to be the first paragraph, essentially a couple sentences on the approach that you want to take, and then a couple sentences on what the students would be getting out of that. The next thing is more granular. It's a description of how you teach. And so you want to talk about things like classroom behavior. How will you control that? What are some issues you may have addressed in the past in terms of how you teach? Are you thinking about putting students into small groups throughout the school day? So what they call pods, essentially. So you've got a desk of 4 desks over here and 4 desks over there and blah, blah. Okay. So how do you plan on accomplishing that more in the clouds approach, the philosophy thing in your first statement? So you start with your philosophy, conception of teaching and learning, sort of hoity-toity, in the cloud sort of things in your first paragraph, and then second paragraph, bring it into the real world, essentially. And this is how it would function practically, okay? And then your third paragraph is sort of justifying that, and that's where you would really bring in your own experiences. Of course, you're writing this a little bit early, so you won't be applying for jobs or getting your certification, as far as I know, for a few more semesters or a few more years. So this is more of a go-around, but what you want to do is think about experiences that you've had in the past. Some of you I know are teacher's aides. Some of you have done like the high school internships where you go and help out elementary schools and so on. So what you want to do in that third paragraph is sort of justifying it using examples from your past experiences. So that's going to be harder for some of you than others, but you're not going to be writing this till the end of the semester, and you've already by then hopefully completed 40 hours. You should have found something at that point in time to sort of plug in there. So what you want to do again is your first one is more philosophically based, your first paragraph, conception of teaching, and then also the conception of learning. This is how I envision it working. And then the second paragraph is descriptive, but more practical. This is how it has worked, okay? And then the third one is this is how it's worked in the past, I guess I should say. And this is the evidence I present for why I am correct in my first two paragraphs. Okay, so it's a little bit sketchy in terms of how you put together a philosophy statement, and I know a lot of students are used to the concept of, oh, this is how I write a paper. I've got the 5-paragraph structure, this, but that's not the way things work once you get out of early comp. The philosophy statement, and you'll find this out with cover letters as well, is very fluid in its structure, so there's no one right way of putting it there, but that's more generally accepted. Like, you won't shock anybody if you put out those 3 paragraphs in that particular order and address those topics in that way. Okay. One last thing too, and I apologize to those of you that stopped the video before we got to this point, but one thing that you certainly do not want to do is the hoity-toity, cushy, happy feeling stuff that everybody else says. I believe that all children have the capacity to learn. I am a teacher who will change people's lives. Those are hollow sentiments, okay? No one believes them. So you may change people's lives and stuff, but you're wasting words, okay? What the administrator wants to get from you when they take a look at your cover letter, philosophy statement, your application, your resume, is how is this person going to function within the wider school environment. So if I'm an administrator and I like constructivist approaches and you're writing about something completely different, I know I'm probably not going to be giving you an interview. So you want to make sure that your philosophy statement is very straightforward, not empty. Okay, not talking about how every student has the potential to be a success and how I'm going to change lives and all of that stuff. That's sort of a given, okay, I hope, at this point in time. That's why you want to be a teacher. We get that, we understand, but your philosophy statement is more of a business transaction, business communication. This is this is how I expect to fit in to your environment as a teacher within your school. So again, that's one thing you want to really avoid, is sort of the hoity-toity fluffy stuff that just doesn't work. And so that's basically a philosophy statement in a nutshell. Remember that your philosophy statement and your philosophy journal are 2 different things. Your journal is sort of a launching point for your official statement. You're not going to send a journal in the mail to an administrator. You're going to send your philosophy statement in the mail to an administrator eventually. But this is sort of a dry run through that.